So yesterday's video focused on some key terms and features of a parabola. For example, the vertex, whether it's a maximum or a minimum, how to find, label the axis of symmetry, what the axis of symmetry is, x-intercepts, and the y-intercept of a parabola. So today, instead of having the graphs given to us, we are simply given the equation of a quadratic function, and now we're going to have to make the graph ourselves. So we're going to graph y equals x squared. And to graph y equals x squared, we can actually just do some super easy steps, and that is to actually start with a table. So we're going to start with a table of values, which are going to give us some points, and then we're going to graph those points and create our parabola. So for the equation y equals x squared, we're going to plug in some negative x values, 0, and some positive x values. So let's plug in -3. So y is equal to -3 squared. Make sure that -3 is in parentheses. So -3 times -3 is +9. Well, hey, what's +3 squared? Well, +3 squared is 3 times 3, which is also 9. Okay. Then for -2, y is equal to -2 squared. Well, -2 times -2 is +4. Well, what would 2 squared be? So y is equal to 2 squared. 2 times 2 is also 4. And then -1, so y is equal to -1 squared. -1 times -1 is +1. Well, if you plug in +1 and square it, you also get +1. And then 0 squared is simply 0. So now we have this table of values, which are really a bunch of points. So for this equation, when x is -3, y is 9. When, I don't know why I put an extra parenthesis. When x is -2, y is 4. When x is -1, y is 1. When x is 0, y is 0. When x is 1, y is 1. When x is 2, y is 4. And when x is 3, y is 9. So we have a bunch of points, -3, 9, -2, 4, etc. Let's plot those points. So let's plot -3, 9. Let's plot -2, 4. -1, 1. 0, 0. 1, 1. 2, 4. And 3, 9. Well, check it out. Isn't this point 1, 2, 3 spaces from the y-axis? And so is this point. These 2 points are perfect reflections of each other. Same with these 2 points and these 2 points. Okay, so now let's go ahead and draw in. I see that my points have taken the shape of a parabola, so I'm going to go ahead and draw in my curve for my parabola. And you want it to be a U shape. You want it to be a smooth shape down here. Make sure it's not a V. You don't want it to come to a point. You need your parabolas to be a U shape. All right, so we have created our parabola. Let's identify some key features now. So the key features of the parabola that I want to talk about are the vertex, whether that vertex is a maximum or minimum. Is this positively or negatively oriented? I want to identify my x-intercepts, my y-intercept, and my axis of symmetry. So for this particular graph, our vertex is right here. And our vertex is at the point 0, 0. And this vertex is the very, least point. All the points are above it, which makes it a minimum. My parabola is upwards facing, so I know that it's positively oriented. And it crosses the x-axis right here. So not only is this point a vertex, it's also the x-intercept. So it has one x-intercept at 0, 0. And then the y-intercept, well, hey, it hits the y-axis at this point as well. So this point is not only the x-intercept and the vertex, it's also the y-intercept, which is totally possible. That happens sometimes. And then the axis of symmetry, remember, is a line that divides the graph perfectly in half. And you always write it as an equation, x equals some number h. Well, what is that h value? Remember, the h value comes from the vertex, hk. And the x value of our vertex was 0. So our axis of symmetry is the line x equals 0. So our x value of our vertex is 0, and then that's also the what x is equal to in the axis of symmetry. And that line, I'm going to actually use a highlighter, divides at x equals 0, divides this graph perfectly in half. This is the axis of symmetry, x equals 0. All right, so why don't you go ahead and give it a shot in example 2. Now you have the equation y equals negative 2x squared. The first thing you're going to do is make a table of values that'll give you some points that are on the parabola. So y is equal to negative 2x squared. I recommend that you use some positive x values, some negative x values, and 0. Plug those x values in, get your y values, then plot those points, draw on your parabola, and then identify the key information of that parabola up here. So why don't you press pause on the video and press play when you're ready to check your work. When I plug in negative 3 into this equation, I get y is equal to negative 2 times negative 3 squared. Well, negative 3 squared is 9, and 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. When I plug in negative 2, I get negative 2 times negative 2 squared, which is negative 2 times 4, so negative 8. When I plug in negative 1, I get negative 2 times negative 1 squared. Negative 1 squared is 1, so negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. When I plug in 0, I get y is equal to negative 2 times 0 squared. 0 squared is just 0, so negative 2 times 0 is 0. When I plug in 1, I get y is equal to negative 2 times 1 squared. So y is equal to negative 2 times 1, which is simply negative 2. When I plug in 2, I get negative 2 times 2 squared. So y equals negative 2 times 4, which is simply negative 8. And then y is equal to negative 2 times 3 squared. Y is equal to negative 2 times 9, which is negative 18. So let's plot those points. So the first point I'm going to plot is negative 3, negative 18, which isn't on our graph. It's going to be somewhere like down here. Negative 2, 8. Negative 2, negative 8, sorry. Is here. Just kidding. Negative 1, negative 2. 0, 0. 1, negative 2. 2, negative 8. And then 3, negative 18 again. Somewhere over here. So when we sketch in our parabola, this time it looks like we have a downward facing parabola. Well, there's my vertex. That vertex also happens to be the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and then the axis of symmetry is the line that divides this parabola in half, which goes through the vertex. This is my axis of symmetry, and it's the equation x equals 0. So when you make these graphs, you want to make sure that you draw the axis of symmetry as a dashed line. You label it AOS, axis of symmetry, and you write the equation next to it. So when I grade your graphs, I'm going to be looking for this as well as the main parabola. So let's go ahead and fill in our information. Our vertex is at 0, 0. It's a maximum because everything is below that. It's the highest point on the graph. This is negatively oriented because it's downward facing. The x-intercept is also 0, 0. The y-intercept is also 0, 0. And the axis of symmetry is x equals the x value of our vertex, so x equals 0. And that's all for today.